Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Private equity is a growing part of the global investment landscape, offering access to companies not listed on public markets. But selecting the right partners is a key challenge for investors. Remember, the information in this episode is general in nature and doesn't take into account your own circumstances. Obsidian Capital is an Italian investment firm that focuses on private markets, working with a range of fund managers across different geographies and sectors, including technology, healthcare, and business services. Daniele Mellana is a partner at Obsidian Capital, which is working with Solar Capital, a great supporter of this podcast. He joins me now from Italy. Daniele, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Hello there. Thanks for having me here.
Now, can you give us a quick overview of Obsidian Capital, what you do, where you invest, how you position yourself in the private equity landscape?
Of course. So Obsidian Capital was founded 7 years ago, and it's a regulated alternative asset management company focusing only on international private markets. The private equity selection capabilities come from the two founders' experience in a private holding company down here in Italy, where for 20 years they invested in private equity funds. But in 2017, they decided to bring this expertise to the market by launching the asset management business and started raising money from family offices, high net worth individuals, and institutional clients. And as you mentioned, we operate in a business that is about not listed companies where access to information is limited, and Bloomberg terminal basically doesn't exist. And so there are some databases, but the information is far off from being complete. So you need really to rely on your own research. And it's still a business, it's still a people business. So you need to have good relations with all of the managers you invest with, and these need to be built over time.
And so do you invest with managers, so PE managers, or do you do the investing yourselves?
No, what we do, we construct a private equity fund of fund portfolios.
Right.
So it means that we are manager selectors and portfolio constructors, so to say.
Great. So how do you pick those managers?
Yeah, we of course follow some criteria. I might mention some. So first, we are middle market investor, and this means that we want to be invested with middle market managers. This is a pretty broad definition. It changes from geography to geography, but usually is companies with revenues in the range between 50 and $1 billion US dollars. And we really think this is the sweet spot for investing in private equity, because our companies usually with high growth potential, more motivated management, and where opportunities in value creation are much higher, thanks especially to improvement in efficiencies. And usually the hand-on approach is much more visible than in larger deals.
Okay, and so when that comes, bringing it back to our own geography, so the Asian region, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, are there many opportunities in our region? So 50 to 100 billion US, it's still a sizable amount of money. Are there many opportunities in this region?
Of course, there are many opportunities. Also, you need to factor in that today the APAC region is basically the second market for private equity in terms of deals, average ticket size, and number of operators. I think today is APAC region in terms of private equity activities basically as twice as Europe, and half of the activity in North America.
Okay, and hence Obsidian Capital's interest in the region, because to be honest, on our show, we haven't done many interviews with Italian fund managers, to be perfectly honest, Daniele. And so it is interesting that you're in this region. What role does sector or geography, or expertise in sector, expertise in geography, play when you're looking for a manager? So I'm sort of still exploring this idea that you're investing in this region. How much is it that you need people on the ground here who know what they're doing?
Yes, of course, that's a really key to have people on the ground. So, of course, as you mentioned, we are an Italian manager and fund selectors, and that means that we travel a lot, but we want to be invested with managers that are deep roots in the places where they invest. And so basically, we really rely on our own research. That means that we really travel like crazy, so to say. And we really want to meet the managers. So as part of our due diligence, of course, we want to meet the people we give money to locally. We want to visit the headquarters, discuss their strategy, their track record, their people background. And so we really have a pretty disciplined due diligence process in place.
Stay with me, Daniele. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Daniele Mellana from Obsidian Capital. Okay, so they're the sorts of managers you're looking for. Before the break, we discussed that. What are the sorts of investments that you're seeing here? And I've got a pack here in front of me, and you talk about a super cycle, particularly around technology and investment trends. What are the sorts of areas that you're seeing opportunities in the private market as opposed to public markets?
Yeah, of course. The unlisted markets are less dragged by what's called the beta effect, right? They are much more correlated. And if you consider the life cycle of one private equity fund is usually 10 years. So, of course, we need to start with a kind of top-down approach and see what the trends are. This is why, for instance, in all of our vintages investing in international private equity, we want to be exposed to Asia and the APAC region because we really see this secular growth trend. Even though, of course, there can be hiccups like it happened with China. So now we are launching our new APAC strategy, and probably China would be ruled out at the beginning, but of course, then we have 4 years to invest, and then we can maybe reconsider it. And we want to focus more on some of our geographies in Asia at the moment, India and Japan first. But also in terms of sectors, we are pretty sector agnostic. So but of course, we want to be invested again in secular trends. Then business service, technology represent a pretty large part of our portfolio. Whereas we tend to exclude some others like, real estate, metals and mining. So we represent a kind of good diversification factor for an Australian investor, as a large part of the portfolio is exactly in this segment. And also, of course, we apply some ESG filters, and then there are some other sectors like oil and gas and energy and tobacco and alcohol that are excluded from the portfolios.
Okay, so property and metals and mining, why is it that you are less favoured towards those sorts of sectors at the moment?
No, there is no prejudice in it. Is the fact that it's usually in the metals and mining sector, a lot of big deals are happening, and those are not to be included in the middle market range that we mentioned before.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But of course, there is a kind of indirect way to play those sectors because we do also have some Australian managers in portfolio in our previous vintages, and of course, maybe you want to be investing with managers that are focusing on sectors like business service to metals and mining sector. So it's a kind of way to indirectly play this theme in portfolio.
And what about the technology you mentioned as an area that you're interested in looking at? But technology is a small word covering a lot of areas. Is it more around AI and virtual reality / augmented reality? Are they the sorts of areas that you're seeing opportunities at the moment?
Yeah, of course, AI is a big theme. I mean, it's on everyone's mouth at the moment. And of course, we don't want to miss out. So, of course, we invest in that segment with managers, but we work with managers that are kind of investing in companies servicing the AI.
Yeah.
So, because now the largest investors are made by the usual suspects that we can find on the listed markets. But of course, also indirectly, we want to indirectly play that theme via business services or, for instance, data centers and all of what can be called the complementary business to the AI.
Okay. Finally, before we leave, what are the trends you're seeing in the private equity sector at the moment? So we have heard a lot about it, and it ebbs and flows. at times, but it just seems in Australia at the moment, investors are looking for non-publicly listed assets more and more. And part of that's because Australia has this massive amount of superannuation or retirement savings, which we are trying to place. And it just seems that non-listed assets are very popular at the moment. Do you think that'll continue?
Of course, I mean, the portion of private equity investments in portfolio is growing massively year after year. I mean, of course, if you take a US endowment, already 60% of their portfolio is invested in such assets. But for instance, if I talk about my own country, that's less than probably 6%, including real estate. But this trend is really changing. As said, we are sector agnostic, but of course we are seeing some clear trends. But you can also get it from newspaper headlines that the globalization is not over, but is decreasing. And so what you want to do, of course, you want to be invested in local businesses that are not really exposed to what's happening at the moment. So we create this funnel at the very beginning with an array of opportunities, and then of course little by little we filter out and we remain with the manager strategies and sectors we want to be having in portfolio for the next 10 years.
Fantastic. Daniele, thank you very much for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you very much.
That was Daniele Mellana, partner at Obsidian Capital, which is working with Sodor Capital. It's a great supporter of this podcast. Remember, information in this podcast is general in nature and you should get professional advice and make sure a product is right for you before proceeding. This is the Fear and Greed Business Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, a daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Aylmer. Enjoy your day.